Welcome everybody to my channel. My name is Monkey C, and welcome to my new Madden 24 franchise series, where I will let the CPU decide who my team will be. This is the first time I'm opening up a series here on this channel, so it's gonna be fun because at the end of 2023, some coaches will be fired and I will take over one of those teams, but it will be decided based on how this simulated season plays out. One rule is that I can't manage the worst roster to ensure that we don't have the number one pick of the draft, and it adds some spice to who else we could be picking. This series will be played out CPU versus CPU, and I'll be watching these games with the playbooks that I made, and my main job is evaluating these players like you viewers and manage the roster so that they can become a Super Bowl caliber team. So it's going to be a different twist to the series where we will start at the beginning of the 2024 off-season, where our GM and coaching journey is birthed. Some in-house things before we sim to the end of the season. Our league settings will be played at 10-minute quarters with 16 seconds accelerated. I'll be keeping track of the league stats to make sure that there's not too many plays or too little plays on our side, and so that could be adjusted in the future. Play cooldowns are up so that we have a variety of plays being called. I also turned off dynamic momentum because it's overpowered in this game. Trade difficulty is put to hard, so this series is also going to be more challenging because the other thing I did was make free agent motivations on very high. In fact, if there are players whose interest bars are red or lower, I will not pursue them or re-sign them in this series. It could be a little bit interesting, a little twist to the game, as if they're asking for a trade as well. The last thing I have here is maxing out star development, and that's really just for more fun and hopefully more development traits in the draft. Our XP sliders are inspired by a YouTuber, Mr. Hurricane, so when you get a chance, go check out his video. He put in a lot of work, but the only slight changes I made was that the offensive line gets a slight increase because Madden does a bad job of helping us develop offensive line. The other thing I changed is running back regression that has been maxed out because running backs are not getting valued as much anymore, and I just want to see more younger running backs take up starting roles early. As for gameplay sliders, I'm still working out the kinks and will be doing some research, but I'll show you what sliders I'm working with on week 1 of this series. Alright, I'm excited to see who's in need of new management at the end of the season, so let's sim all the way to the postseason and we'll see the results. Here we are in week 18, and off jump we know that the Dolphins and Colts won't be one of the teams that need a new head coach. So let's find out who does, but first let's check out some potential candidates in the standings. The Raiders finished in last place, so that means we won't be taking over the Raiders. But it could be the Bears, the Rams, the Saints, or even another team. The coaches that were fired were the Raiders head coach, Gerald Simmons, and there's only one other head coach that was shockingly fired, and that was Sean Payton, another one and done in Denver. So I will be taking over as the new GM for the Denver Broncos, and my head coach is gonna be Mr. No Matter What himself, Vontae Mack. The former number 1 pick for the Cleveland Browns is now going to be a head coach for the Denver Broncos. Let's get to know who the Broncos were before we figure out who the Broncos are going to be. The Broncos have a rich history with winning championships with John Elway in 97 and 98. And of course, Elway was a huge part in bringing in Peyton Manning, leading them to also winning Super Bowl 50. But since that celebratory day, it has been a painful experience for Broncos fans for the last 8 years. In fact, the Super Bowl MVP Von Miller here has won a second ring with the Los Angeles Rams and could potentially even get his third with the Buffalo Bills. But since Peyton Manning's retirement, the Broncos have tried every avenue to find their next guy. I mean, just look at these names. Guys like Brock Osweiler, Trevor Siemian, Paxton Lynch, Case Keenum, Drew Lock, Joe Flacco, all before trading for Russell Wilson. At the time, there was excitement with the Let Russ Cook era, but that ended quickly before he could say, "Broncos country, let's ride." It was truly a ride-or-die experience with Russell Wilson. The Broncos traded away 2 first-round picks and second-round picks and other pieces just to watch Geno Smith take his former team to the playoffs, leaving the Broncos country in more sorrow than joy. And in these past few years, along with that, we have only seen the division rival Chiefs roll into a dynasty, and the Broncos are climbing themselves out of a travesty. I am hoping that we can bring another championship to the city of Denver after a long enough drought, pain, and agony, and hopefully new hope arises with Coach Vontae Mack and I. Vontae Mack is running either a spread offense or vertical zone run. The main thing in our offense is the ability to play fast and catch defenses off guard with more speed on the field. Depending on the type of quarterback, the playbook I made is subject to change. I do like having a running back being able to catch the ball out of the backfield, and having our offense play fast in all of our specialized positions, and calling more zone runs. Our defense is a disguised 3-4 defense. I like rushing 5 almost every play and mixing in some blitzes. Getting to the quarterback is priority number 1, especially when Patrick Mahomes is in your division. My secondary will be in man coverage a lot of the times, and having safeties that can do a lot of things will be important, which is why I have hybrid safeties in my defense. Before I get into the current rosters and stats, let's check out the playoff bracket and see how this plays out. After the wildcard round, the Chiefs beat the Ravens to advance, and they will be playing the Browns, who beat the Jets. The number 1 seeded Buffalo Bills will be playing the Dolphins, who beat the Colts. On the NFC side, the Lions beat the Packers to play the number 1 seeded Dallas Cowboys. Seahawks beat the Falcons and will play the Eagles, who beat the Panthers. And after the divisional round, the Lions and the Seahawks both advanced to the NFC Championship. And the Bills will host the Chiefs to see who advances to the Super Bowl. Before we jump into the Super Bowl, here is the Pro Bowl roster. Quarterbacks are Josh Allen, Tua Tagovailoa, and Lamar Jackson for the AFC. And running backs are Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, and Breece Hall. I'm curious to know if there's any Broncos that made it to this list. Tim Patrick made the Pro Bowl. Interesting. None at tight end and the offensive line. Former Bronco Von Miller made the list. No linebackers. In secondary, only Kareem Jackson made it. So 2 guys, Tim Patrick and Kareem Jackson. Interesting. I can't wait to see what the stats look like later. But the Kansas City Chiefs will play against the Seattle Seahawks in the Super Bowl. And the results are, the Chiefs beat the Seahawks 38-35. Patrick Mahomes wins Super Bowl MVP, and it must be tiring to watch the Chiefs dynasty arise, but the only way to conquer the AFC is by dethroning them. So this series' yearly awards, Patrick Mahomes wins MVP, Mike McCarthy wins Coach of the Year, AFC Offensive Player of the Year is Isaiah Pacheco, and Patrick finished 8th. Defensive Player of the Year is also from the AFC West, it's Max Crosby. Offensive Rookie of the Year is Rashee Rice. Defensive Rookie of the Year is Keon White. Josh Allen was the best QB. Russell Wilson was number 10 on the list. Best running back goes to Isaiah Pacheco again. Best wide receiver is Tyreek Hill. Tim Patrick finished 3rd. Best offensive lineman is Tyler Linderbaum. Best defensive lineman is Max Crosby. Best linebacker is TJ Watt. Baron Browning finished 5th on the list. And Greg Newsome wins DB of the Year, and Surtain finished 8th on the year. Best kicker is Nick Folk. On the NFC Offensive Player of the Year is Mike Evans. Defensive Player of the Year goes to Hassan Reddick. Offensive Rookie of the Year is Bijan Robinson. Defensive Rookie of the Year is Byron Young. Best quarterback is Dak Prescott. Best running back is Christian McCaffrey. Best receiver is Mike Evans. Best offensive lineman is Zach Martin. Best D-line is Hassan Reddick again. Best linebacker goes to Kayvon Thibodeau. Best DB goes to Jonathan Owens. Best kicker is Eddie Pinheiro. Let's take a look at some league leaders this year before we look at our personal stats and roster. Patrick Mahomes leads the league in yards thrown, a few yards shy of 5,000. Baker Mayfield led the league with 39 passing touchdowns. Russell Wilson had 34. We'll look at the Broncos stats after this. Saquon Barkley led the league in rushing yards. And Pacheco had 17 touchdowns, tied with Bijan Robinson. That's a great year. Receiving is CeeDee Lamb, who led the NFL in yards. And Mike Evans had 17 touchdown receptions that led the league. Tim Patrick finished third with 14. And sacks were led by DeForest Buckner, tied with Greg Rousseau with 16.5. And the interception leader is Greg Newsome. So how did the Broncos do this year? Wow, they finished 8-9 and fired Sean Payton. So in back-to-back years of one and dones, but that's very harsh on the first year. Ownership is not playing around. But how did the team do? Russell Wilson had a very good year from a numbers standpoint. Javonte Williams was under 1,000 yards, and Samaje Perine had some vulture touchdowns too. Tim Patrick had a great year, but the only one over 1,000 yards with 14 touchdowns. Everyone else was below 1,000 yards. However, Courtland Sutton did have 9 touchdowns. And beyond that, Jerry Jeudy was a non-factor, and Greg Dulcich did okay. Offensive line looks like they protected the quarterback enough, so offensively there could be improvement, but it wasn't that bad in my opinion. Defensively, Josie Jewell led in tackles. TFL was led by Zach Allen, the only one with double-digit TFLs. Yikes. Sacks-wise, no one had double-digit sacks. In fact, it was a non-factor on this defense. So we're getting a much fuller picture of what happened now. Interception leader was Patrick Surtain with 4 and a couple of other guys, so takeaway was pretty good. Overall though, we were 5th in passing, but only 21st in points scored, and 31st when running the ball. On defense, we were 25th worst, allowing almost close to 25 points a game. Passing defense was in the middle of the pack, but the Broncos could not stop the run at all, allowing over 130 yards rushing a game. That needs to change. So the record is showing 8-9, but does not indicate that the Broncos were playing fundamentally sound football. We have a lot of work to do for sure. This team doesn't feel like they are a quarterback away and certainly a few pieces away before even being competitive. So we're really looking at a rebuilding year with the hopes of finding a future quarterback to replace Russell Wilson. This offseason, we will have $58 million to work with, and that might indicate that we have a few guys retiring. Some big names retiring like Harrison Smith, Ryan Tannehill, Cameron Hayward, Patrick Peterson. And now even Aaron Rodgers is retired. Wow, the Jets are now in search of a new quarterback once again. Calais Campbell, Jason Kelsey, Brandon Graham, and Lane Johnson retired. So the Eagles will have their work cut out for them this offseason as well. And Kareem Jackson, and wow, Russell Wilson is retired. That explains the salary cap increase. Thanks, Russ. That's the most he's done for this organization, and now we are in serious need of finding a new quarterback again. Beyond that, some other guys in free agency retired, and Pete Carroll also retiring after taking the Seahawks to the Super Bowl in this series. Speaking of coaching, the Broncos fired their offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator, so that's another thing to add to our to-do list this offseason. So the last thing to check out is the roster and getting a feel in this episode to understand the team a little bit more before the next episode, which will be the off-season. The eye-popping spot on this team is at the quarterback position, but as mentioned before, I don't think that they're a quarterback away. But we'll see if the draft provides a good one, and if they do, I won't hesitate to take one, but it also doesn't hurt to improve all the other areas on this team. Javonte Williams came off a major knee injury a year ago and didn't reach the 1,000-yard mark this season, and the way that the running backs are going to be used in my system, Williams might just be limited to being just a power back in my offense. Courtland Sutton is a fine number 2 receiver in this offense, and we could use another receiver because Jerry Jeudy just isn't that guy. The guy I'm excited to see develop is Marvin Mims Jr., and there's a high chance trading Jeudy is the move going forward for us to give the young receiver more targets. The offensive line is at an okay spot with Garrett Bowles and Mike McGlinchey, who they overpaid in my opinion, but the interior linemen could use some help to go along with young Quinn Mearnes, who's going to be a very good player for us, hopefully for a long time. I also love drafting offensive linemen in Madden, which isn't a popular opinion, but finding that gem that becomes an important piece to the trenches is very satisfying and fun to watch on this offense. We may even add another tight end to go with Greg Dulcich, but he's a fine player if we choose to continue his development. But this is already telling that this offense truly isn't just a quarterback away, with multiple holes that still need to be filled. Defensively, Zach Allen is a nice player up front for us, but there's some exciting pieces when you have Baron Browning coming off a 9-sack season in this series, and could be dominant with the way that we run our defense this upcoming year. But his contract is up next year, and I hope he wants to stay with us pending on his interest bar. On the other side is Nick Bonito, who also has exciting features to him with his athleticism, speed, and finesse moves. Having these two as my starting edge players to begin the series is encouraging that we may be moving in the right direction by building through the trenches. Drew Sanders could be a fun off-ball linebacker to watch play. He was highly touted coming into the draft last year and should be exciting to see how he can thrive in our system as well. And we'll be asking a lot of him since our linebackers will most likely be free agents during this offseason, and there will be lots of blitzing opportunities for him in our defense. Justin Simmons is regressing and could very well be a cut candidate for us. And on the secondary, there really isn't any great options aside from the heart of this defense, Patrick Surtain. He's gonna be a Bronco for a long time if he wants to be here, and if it all works out, Surtain is certainly a vital piece to rebuilding this defense to becoming a championship caliber team. But we have a lot of holes and we need to figure out solution fast. Oh, and by the way, we won't have a second round pick, and our first round pick as of now is projected to be the 14th overall. So a potential trade up or trade down spot for us here. And unfortunately, there is only one quarterback projected to go top 5, and that's Demarius Browning. And he looks incredible. When you play CPU versus CPU, these traits are gonna matter a ton, especially how they handle pressure. And Browning does look pretty good, but is it worth drafting him even though it's gonna cost us a lot to move up? Or do we just continue the carousel of quarterbacks for one more year? A lot to consider in the next episode. But these are the issues of trying to decide whether to go for it all or not. Being in the middle of the pack might be the worst position that we put ourselves in. I think next year should be a building year, and we'll need to be financially responsible. We have the money to work with right now, but also tons of work to do, and it's not going to be an easy task. The off-season episode will be next on how to make this Denver Broncos team once again a competitive force in the NFL. So the off-season will be interesting, and we'll see what young core players are going to be the future building blocks of this team. And we will begin this new era with old traditions of winning football games again in this juggernaut of an AFC, and all the while being in the same division as Justin Herbert and the Super Bowl MVP Patrick Mahomes. Thank you guys so much for watching. I think this series is gonna be a ton of fun for me, and hopefully for you as well as the viewers. Please leave a like as I launch this series, and feel free to give me some feedback on how to bring the Broncos back to being a championship caliber team. And for the very first time, I'm Monkey C, and I'm out.